I never thought my babysitter would be the one to drag me into something so bizarre, but looking back, it almost feels unreal. I was just a kid, maybe around 10 or 11, and like most kids, I didn't think twice when the adults around me acted weird. My parents both worked long hours, so they hired this babysitter named Jenna to look after me. She seemed nice enough at first, always smiling, telling me stories, and making the best mac and cheese. But one summer afternoon, everything changed. It started with a simple chore. Jenna asked me to help feed our family donkey, Daisy. Now, Daisy wasn't just any donkey, she was practically a part of the family, always hanging out near the fence, waiting for snacks and pats on the nose. I didn't mind helping out. In fact, spending time with Daisy was one of my favorite things to do. But that day, Jenna had something different in mind. She brought out this old camcorder from her bag and said she wanted to make a fun little movie with Daisy and me. I didn't really understand why, but I was used to Jenna filming random things, like Daisy eating flowers or me kicking a soccer ball. So, when she set up the camera and told me to stand next to Daisy, I didn't think much of it. But then Jenna started giving me these strange instructions, things that didn't make sense. She'd laugh and say it was just for fun, but something about the way she kept glancing at the camera made me feel weird. I asked her why we needed to record it, but she just brushed it off, saying we were making memories. I didn't want to seem rude, so I just went along, even though a knot was forming in my stomach. Then she started telling me to do things with Daisy that felt odd, nothing that hurt Daisy or me, just unusual. I kept hesitating, and Jenna would get a little annoyed, saying I was being too serious. At one point, Daisy seemed uncomfortable too, shuffling away and flicking her ears back. That's when I knew something was off. Just as I was about to say I didn't want to do this anymore, we heard the crunch of gravel, my dad's truck pulling into the driveway way earlier than usual. Jenna's face went pale, and in a flash, she yanked the camera down and started packing up. My dad walked over, looking confused at the setup. He asked Jenna what we were doing, and before she could answer, I blurted out, "Just feeding Daisy." Jenna laughed nervously and said we were just making a silly video. But even at that young age, I could tell Dad wasn't buying it. The way he looked at Jenna made me feel safer, like I wasn't the only one who thought something wasn't right. He didn't say much at that moment, just sent me inside to wash up. As I walked away, I could hear him questioning Jenna, his voice low and serious. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just avoided something bad, but at the time, I couldn't put into words what that was. All I knew was that things with Jenna would never be the same after that day. What really happened that afternoon? And why did Jenna act so strange? You won't believe what I found out later, and trust me, it's more twisted than you think. Stay tuned to find out the truth. After that strange afternoon, things felt different. Jenna still came over to babysit, but there was this weird tension hanging around whenever she was there. My dad didn't mention what he talked about with her, but I noticed he started coming home earlier than usual. Sometimes he would just sit outside with Daisy, scratching her ears and looking lost in thought. I wanted to ask him if something was wrong, but I was too nervous to bring it up. Jenna, on the other hand, acted like nothing ever happened. She kept being her usual cheerful self, making dinner, helping me with homework, and telling silly stories. But I couldn't shake that uneasy feeling. I kept replaying that afternoon in my head, wondering why it felt so strange. It wasn't just the filming, it was the way Jenna kept looking over her shoulder and how anxious she got when Dad came home early. A few days later, while Jenna was busy in the kitchen, I snuck into the living room where she usually kept her bag. I was curious about that old camcorder she'd used. Maybe if I could see the tape, I'd understand why it all felt so wrong. I rummaged around quietly, and just when I thought I wouldn't find it, there it was, stuffed at the bottom of her bag. I carefully pulled it out and turned it on, but the screen just showed a message, no tape. My heart sank. She must have taken it out. Just then, Jenna's voice startled me from behind. "What are you doing?" she asked, a forced smile on her face. I froze, trying to come up with an excuse. "Just looking for my homework," I mumbled. She didn't say anything, just gave me a long, hard look before telling me to go wash up for dinner. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what could be on that tape and why Jenna was acting so weird about it. The next morning, when Jenna went to take a phone call outside, I decided to check the bag one more time. This time, there was no camcorder. She must have taken it with her. My mind was spinning with questions. What was on that tape that made her so nervous? Why did she look so scared when Dad showed up that day? I started wondering if I should just tell my dad everything. But part of me was worried I'd get Jenna in trouble, and what if I was just overthinking it all? Then one evening, as Dad and I were having dinner, he casually asked if Jenna ever did anything strange while babysitting. My heart pounded, but I didn't know how to explain it without sounding silly. I just shrugged and said, "Not really." Dad gave me a thoughtful look, but didn't push. But something told me he knew more than he was letting on. Over the next few days, Jenna seemed on edge too. I couldn't help but feel trapped between telling Dad everything and keeping quiet to avoid making things worse. And just when I thought things couldn't get more complicated, something happened that turned the whole situation upside down. One evening, I was out feeding Daisy when I noticed something shiny half buried in the dirt near the fence. I bent down and pulled it out, a small, scratched-up cassette tape. My stomach flipped as I realized it looked just like the kind that went into Jenna's old camcorder. What was this tape doing out here? And more importantly, what would I find if I played it? I didn't know whether to feel relieved or more terrified, but one thing was for sure, I had to know the truth. My hands were trembling as I wiped the dirt off the cassette tape. It definitely looked like the kind that would fit Jenna's camcorder. I glanced around, half expecting Jenna to appear out of nowhere, but the yard was empty except for Daisy, who was munching on some hay. I quickly stuffed the tape into my pocket and hurried inside. For the rest of the evening, I couldn't concentrate on anything. I kept thinking about the tape and what might be on it. Should I try to play it? But how? I didn't have any way to watch it, and asking Jenna was definitely not an option. My mind raced with possibilities. Maybe it was just some random tape that had nothing to do with that afternoon. Or maybe it held the answer to why Jenna had been acting so weird. The next day, I decided to take a chance. While Jenna was in the kitchen, I slipped into her bag again, hoping the camcorder might be there. No luck. It was like she knew I'd been looking for it. I couldn't stop thinking about how the tape ended up outside near Daisy's pen. Had Jenna dropped it by accident? Or had she hidden it there? That evening, Dad mentioned he was going to fix the old VCR in the garage. I felt a spark of hope. Maybe I could sneak out there later and see if it worked. After dinner, while Jenna was busy cleaning up, I quietly slipped the tape from my pocket and headed to the garage. My heart pounded as I slid the tape into the VCR and pressed play. At first, the screen was just static. Then, a shaky image appeared. The camera was pointed at Daisy, but there was no sound. My hands felt sweaty as I leaned closer, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Suddenly, the camera panned over, and I saw myself standing next to Daisy, looking uncomfortable. Jenna's voice came from behind the camera, telling me to move closer. I quickly hit stop, feeling a wave of nausea. Why was she filming that? And why did she seem so nervous about it? Before I could process what I'd just seen, I heard the garage door creak open. I nearly jumped out of my skin as Dad walked in, looking surprised to see me there. "What are you doing?" he asked, his eyes darting to the VCR. I stammered something about just being curious, but he looked at me differently, like he knew something was wrong. He noticed the tape sticking out of the VCR and carefully pulled it out. His expression changed as he read the label. He didn't say a word, just took the tape and walked back into the house, leaving me alone in the garage, my mind racing. What was really going on? And why did Jenna seem so desperate to keep that tape hidden? I knew one thing: I needed answers, but I had no idea how deep this was about to go. That night, I barely slept. My mind kept replaying the brief glimpse I'd seen on the tape and Dad's reaction when he found it. I couldn't figure out why Jenna would be filming something so random, or why she seemed so nervous about it. More than anything, I wondered what Dad was thinking. He hadn't said a word about it since he took the tape, and his silence made me even more anxious. The next morning, Jenna came over like usual, but I could tell something was off. She kept glancing at Dad, trying to gauge his mood. Dad barely acknowledged her, just sipped his coffee with a thoughtful expression. I felt trapped between them, my heart pounding every time one of them moved. I just wanted someone to say something, anything, to break the tension. Then, just as Jenna was about to take me outside to feed Daisy, Dad cleared his throat and said, "Actually, I need to talk to you, Jenna." His tone was calm but firm, and Jenna froze, her smile faltering. She glanced at me, then back at Dad. "Sure," she said lightly, but her voice sounded strained. Dad led her into the living room, and I could hear the low murmur of their voices through the wall. I couldn't make out much, but I caught snippets, Dad saying something about responsibility and Jenna sounding defensive, insisting it was just harmless fun. My stomach twisted. What did she mean by that? After what felt like forever, the voices stopped. I heard Jenna raise her voice, saying, "You're overreacting," and then the sound of the door slamming. I peeked out the window just in time to see Jenna walking quickly down the driveway, wiping her eyes. Dad came back into the kitchen, his face tense. He didn't look at me right away, just ran his hand through his hair. I couldn't hold back anymore. "Dad," I whispered, "what happened?" He looked at me, his eyes softening. "I'm sorry, buddy," he said quietly. "You don't have to worry about Jenna anymore. I'll be staying home with you for a while." I wanted to ask a million questions, but something in his expression made me stop. Part of me was relieved, but another part still felt uneasy. What was on that tape that made him so upset? And why did Jenna leave like that? Later that day, while Dad was on the phone with someone, probably Mom, I went back out to see Daisy. She seemed unfazed by all the chaos, just munching on some grass like always. As I stroked her nose, I couldn't help but wonder if Jenna had done something worse than I realized. I couldn't get the thought out of my head, was the tape really that bad? Or was there something more that Dad wasn't telling me? I knew I had to find out, no matter what. The next few days felt strangely quiet without Jenna around. Dad didn't talk much about what had happened, and I didn't push him for answers. I could tell he was still trying to figure things out himself. I spent most of my time outside with Daisy, trying to distract myself from the uneasy feeling that something was still unresolved. One evening, as I was brushing Daisy's coat, I noticed something shiny near the barn door. Curious, I bent down and picked it up, a small silver pendant on a broken chain. I recognized it instantly, it belonged to Jenna. She always wore it, saying it was a family keepsake. Why was it out here? I hadn't seen Jenna anywhere near the barn that day. I slipped the pendant into my pocket, feeling a shiver crawl down my spine. Was Jenna sneaking around the property even after Dad told her to leave? The thought made me feel uneasy. I hurried back inside and found Dad in the living room, going through some paperwork. I hesitated, wondering if I should tell him. Just then, Dad's phone rang, and I heard him talking in a low, tense voice. I couldn't catch much, but he kept saying things like, "I understand, and we just want to make sure he's safe." My chest tightened. Was he talking about me? I tried to focus on something else, but my thoughts kept circling back to that tape and Jenna's strange behavior. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around midnight, I thought I heard a noise outside, like someone moving near the barn. I peeked through my window, and my heart skipped a beat. There was a shadowy figure near Daisy's pen. I rubbed my eyes, thinking I was imagining it, but the figure moved again, closer to the barn door. Without thinking, I crept down the stairs and out the back door, trying to stay as quiet as possible. As I got closer, I recognized the figure. It was Jenna. My stomach twisted in knots. What was she doing here in the middle of the night? Jenna seemed to be looking for something, her movements frantic. I watched from behind the fence, unsure whether to confront her or go back inside and tell Dad. Just as I was about to step forward, Daisy brayed loudly, startling both of us. Jenna whipped around, and our eyes met. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then Jenna whispered, "Please, don't tell your dad I was here." Her voice sounded different, almost desperate. I didn't know what to say. Why would she sneak back here after everything that happened? I wanted answers, but I also felt uneasy seeing her like this. Before I could respond, the porch light flicked on, and Dad stepped outside, calling my name. Jenna's eyes widened, and in a flash, she took off into the darkness, leaving me standing there, frozen. Dad rushed over, looking concerned. "What are you doing out here?" he asked, but I couldn't find the words to explain. I just pointed toward the barn, where Jenna had been. Dad's face grew serious, and he pulled me inside without another word. Something was definitely wrong, and I had a feeling that whatever Jenna was looking for, it was more important than I realized. I needed to figure out the truth before things got even more complicated. The next few days felt strangely quiet without Jenna around. Dad didn't talk much about what had happened, and I didn't push him for answers. I could tell he was still trying to figure things out himself. I spent most of my time outside with Daisy, trying to distract myself from the uneasy feeling that something was still unresolved. One evening, as I was brushing Daisy's coat, I noticed something shiny near the barn door. Curious, I bent down and picked it up, a small silver pendant on a broken chain. I recognized it instantly. It belonged to Jenna. She always wore it, saying it was a family keepsake. Why was it out here? I hadn't seen Jenna anywhere near the barn that day. I slipped the pendant into my pocket, feeling a shiver crawl down my spine. Was Jenna sneaking around the property even after Dad told her to leave? The thought made me feel uneasy. I hurried back inside and found Dad in the living room, going through some paperwork. I hesitated, wondering if I should tell him. Just then, Dad's phone rang, and I heard him talking in a low, tense voice. I couldn't catch much, but he kept saying things like, "I understand, and we just want to make sure he's safe." My chest tightened. Was he talking about me? I tried to focus on something else, but my thoughts kept circling back to that tape and Jenna's strange behavior. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around midnight, I thought I heard a noise outside, like someone moving near the barn. I peeked through my window, and my heart skipped a beat. There was a shadowy figure near Daisy's pen. I rubbed my eyes, thinking I was imagining it, but the figure moved again, closer to the barn door. Without thinking, I crept down the stairs and out the back door, trying to stay as quiet as possible. As I got closer, I recognized the figure. It was Jenna. My stomach twisted in knots. What was she doing here in the middle of the night? Jenna seemed to be looking for something, her movements frantic. I watched from behind the fence, unsure whether to confront her or go back inside and tell Dad. Just as I was about to step forward, Daisy brayed loudly, startling both of us. Jenna whipped around, and our eyes met. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then Jenna whispered, "Please, don't tell your dad I was here." Her voice sounded different, almost desperate. I didn't know what to say. Why would she sneak back here after everything that happened? I wanted answers, but I also felt uneasy seeing her like this. Before I could respond, the porch light flicked on, and Dad stepped outside, calling my name. Jenna's eyes widened, and in a flash, she took off into the darkness, leaving me standing there, frozen. Dad rushed over, looking concerned. "What are you doing out here?" he asked, but I couldn't find the words to explain. I just pointed toward the barn, where Jenna had been. Dad's face grew serious, and he pulled me inside without another word. Something was definitely wrong, and I had a feeling that whatever Jenna was looking for, it was more important than I realized. I needed to figure out the truth before things got even more complicated. Back inside the house, Dad locked the door and made sure all the windows were secured. He seemed more tense than ever, and I could tell he was trying to stay calm for my sake. I wanted to tell him everything about the pendant, the tape, and seeing Jenna just now, but the words were stuck in my throat. Finally, Dad sat me down on the couch. "Did you see someone out there?" he asked quietly. I nodded, feeling guilty for not telling him sooner. "It was Jenna," I whispered. His jaw tightened, but he didn't seem surprised. Instead, he let out a long breath, like he'd been expecting this. Before I could ask him what was going on, his phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at the screen and hesitated before picking it up. I heard him talking to someone, his tone serious and low. I couldn't make out everything, but one word stood out: police. My heart pounded. Why would the police be involved? When he hung up, Dad looked at me with a mixture of concern and relief. "I need to explain something," he said gently. He pulled the tape from his pocket, the same one from the garage. "I watched this whole thing," he admitted. "And I think Jenna might be in trouble." I was confused. Trouble? I thought Jenna was the one causing problems. Dad explained that after watching the video, he realized Jenna was acting strange because she wasn't supposed to be filming at all. Apparently, someone else had been pressuring her to record things around our farm, especially Daisy. It wasn't Jenna's idea, but she seemed scared of whoever was making her do it. Dad had called the police to report the situation, but before they could question Jenna, she had disappeared. Now it made sense why she was sneaking around the barn. She must have been looking for the tape, afraid that it would get her into more trouble. Just when I thought I'd heard it all, Dad revealed one more twist. The police had found out that Jenna had been involved with a group that was secretly filming animals for strange online videos. Jenna probably didn't know the full extent, but once she realized it wasn't just innocent filming, she panicked and tried to cover her tracks. I couldn't believe it. Jenna had seemed so normal, just a regular babysitter. But now, knowing she was caught up in something so strange and potentially dangerous made me feel both sad and relieved. Dad promised that Jenna wasn't a bad person, just someone who made some really bad choices. A few days later, the police let us know they had found Jenna safe, staying with relatives in another town. She had confessed to being pressured by someone online, but insisted she never meant to harm anyone. Hearing that gave me a little closure, but it didn't completely erase the weird feeling left behind. In the end, I learned that sometimes people aren't always who they seem, and even those who seem trustworthy can make mistakes. I was just grateful that Dad had been there to protect me and that Daisy was safe. As for Jenna, I hoped she would find a way to make better choices in the future. After everything settled down, life slowly returned to normal. Dad stayed home more often, just to make sure I felt safe. It was strange not having Jenna around after she had been a part of our lives for so long. Sometimes I caught myself wondering how she was doing and if she was okay. I knew she had made some bad choices, but a part of me still hoped she could turn things around. One evening, Dad sat down with me to talk about everything that had happened. He said he was proud of me for being honest with him, even when things got confusing and scary. We talked about how important it is to speak up when something doesn't feel right, no matter who's involved. That made me feel a little better because I had been carrying some guilt for not telling him about Jenna's strange behavior sooner. A few weeks later, we got an update from the police. They had tracked down the group Jenna had gotten involved with and were working on shutting down their operations. Jenna wasn't facing serious charges since it turned out she had been manipulated into filming, but she was going through counseling and staying with family to get her life back on track. Hearing that made me feel a mix of relief and sadness. I didn't hate her, I just wished she had been honest from the start. Daisy remained her usual happy self, completely unaware of all the chaos that had unfolded around her. Spending time with her was comforting, and I started helping Dad with more chores around the farm. I realized how lucky I was to have a safe place and a family that cared about me. Not everyone had that, and maybe that was part of why Jenna had gotten into trouble, looking for belonging in the wrong places. One weekend, Dad surprised me by inviting some neighbors over for a small barbecue. It felt good to have company again, to laugh and talk without feeling like something was lurking in the background. One of the neighbors brought his daughter, Lily, who was around my age. We ended up hanging out by Daisy's pen, feeding her carrots and talking about school. It was nice to feel normal again. That night, as I got ready for bed, I couldn't help but think back on everything that had happened. I learned a lot from the whole experience, mainly that sometimes people make mistakes because they're scared or feel trapped. It didn't make what Jenna did okay, but it helped me understand why she acted the way she did. As I drifted off to sleep, I felt a sense of closure. Things weren't perfect, but they were getting better. I knew I'd always remember this strange chapter of my life, but it didn't feel as heavy anymore. I was moving on, one day at a time, and looking forward to better days ahead.